So good morning and welcome to our February 4th coffee chat with me and my guests today. I have my coffee and it's French vanilla with some coffee in it because that's how I like it. And I have with me, of course, our Chief Medical Technician for Paideia, Ms. Chelcee Pullam.
Hello.
And our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Ms. Garrison, who's been with us. She actually developed all of our programs along the way. So if there's any question you have about curriculum and instruction, Leader in Me, anything about that, she's the one that's going to tell us about it. So today what I want is we'll hold the last 10 minutes for some questions. But if you have something urgent, go ahead and hit the chat button and type out a question, and I'm happy to address that when it's right. Ms. Pullam, tell us some good news, because I've been seeing some heartening news anyway about this COVID.
It is okay. Well, the good news is we've only had like 2 cases this whole week, so we're at 0.24% positivity rate for COVID, which is really good. Compared to the community is at 32.6%, which is still down from last week, which I think we're very proud of. We are already doing everything with requiring masks, trying to keep everybody spaced out, but we're doing good. I'm proud of us, Dr. Winsor.
Yeah.
And other than that, we have an event coming up on February 26th. Finally, I'm so excited. We'll have all vaccines for COVID, as well as a limited amount of flu shots for all scholars or anybody that wants to come get one. So please grab your families, grab your kids, and come join us on February 26th from 10 to 3.
Now, is that posted anywhere for the community to see that, Ms.
It is.
Pullam?
It's on our marquee outside in front of our school. I posted on Class Dojo, posted it on Facebook, and I will be sending out flyers in both Spanish and English this week, and I'll have those flyers again posted on both of those websites as well. So we're getting it going.
Do they have to register for this event, or is it a show-up thing, Ms. Pullam?
No, it's just a walk-in. Just show up, park at either building, and then it'll be in our cafeteria. So please come. If you have any questions, feel free to either email me. I'll put my email in the chat again, or call the school and we'll get you set up. But yeah, just walk-ins. You don't have to sign up or anything.
So what I'd like you to do is make sure let's go through the big playground gates on the north end of our campus. The front door is going to be closed and locked, and everybody come through there, through where the sanctuary is, and then through the caffeinasium doors, and that's where it'll be held, right?
Yep, exactly.
Please mask up, because we're still at Paideia anyway. We're still being careful and cautious to make sure we can continue on. Hey, I have a question for you, Chelcee.
Yes, sir.
Because I get the question from others frequently. It's like, okay, when do you think we'll be able to modify our mask policy? Is there a time that might happen?
Well, if we can,
please.
Yeah, if we can get as many scholars vaccinated or vaccinated, I think it's like over 75%. We're okay. We can, start basically getting rid of the mask mandate, but mask requirement, and kind of get back to how things were and having fun. So yeah, that's what we're aiming for. Let's get as many vaccinated as possible.
Is there an indicator of, because right now we're still well above our extreme rate of we're in the red zone by a far. Is there a zone that we could be in that would, plus I agree if everybody got vaccinated, but there's some that just can't, and there's some that we want to respect their desire, their philosophy, and their wishes. So is there also another indicator when the risk of spread is a certain level?
Yeah, so right now we're above a 10% line, which is like high transmission in the community. So we want to get down to where that transmission is under 10%, and as soon as it gets under there, we're good. I know everybody's still kind of got a lot of wondering of what's going on. But we talk to CDC in Maricopa County every Thursday, and they keep us informed. So as soon as we get down below that 10% line, we're good to be out of like COVID's way.
Wonderful. All right. I want to introduce, I'm sure everybody knows, most people will know Miss Victoria Garrison. She's one of the highest trusted counselors we have at Paideia for our program and keeping it whole child. So Ms. Garrison, talk to us about what you want to talk to us about today.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. And it's good to be here. Good to be live with Dr. Winsor and Ms. Chelcee. So today I wanted to just go over our standards-based grading practice here at Paideia. Next week, we're going to be having our Scholar Parent-Teacher Conferences. So you're going to be hearing a lot of information again about where your scholars are. And I just wanted to give us a little bit of information about how to read those reports when you receive a progress report or a report card. So can you see my screen? Dr. Winsor, is it up?
I can. It's wonderful.
Okay. Okay, great. So standards-based grading at Paideia, let's just talk a little bit about what is standards-based grading. When we say that, what do we mean? Well, basically, we mean that we're measuring our scholars by a set of standards, and we're looking to see mastery of grade level standards and learning objectives. These are standards that are put forth by the state of Arizona. We follow the Arizona state standards, and based on those standards, we measure how well our scholars are doing towards mastering those standards. So each year, each scholar is working towards, progressing towards mastering those standards. These marks or these grades are really individualized. They're based on the scholar and the scholar's progress towards those standards. So it's not comparing scholars to one another. And it's not based on a percentage, it's based on growth and mastery. So a little bit more information about what our standards-based approach means. So we're looking to see what our scholars know and what they're able to do. We're looking to see progress towards that standard. So that means, you know, at the beginning of the year, they're not going to come in exceeding the standard. They're not even going to come in mastering the standard because they're still learning and they're still growing. So when you see an AS, which means approaching the standard, that's not a bad thing at all. That means they're making progress towards mastering the standard. Our standards-based approach clearly communicates expectations ahead of time. So our teachers all begin their lessons with a learning objective, and they state that learning objective. So scholars know what they need to be able to do on that lesson. How will they be able to demonstrate that they've mastered this learning objective? The teacher will tell them before the lesson even begins. And then we emphasize the most recent evidence of learning. So in most other grading systems, grades are averaged, right? So what you did at the beginning of the year when you really didn't know very much is still counted against you at the end of the quarter.
It makes no sense to me. That frustrates me that people still do that.
No, it doesn't make sense, because what we should be looking for is the progress along the way. If the scholar knows the information and has demonstrated mastery by the end of that quarter, that's really what we want to look at, not what they did at the beginning. So we emphasize the most recent evidence of learning. So here are our levels of performance. If you have a scholar in kindergarten through 6th grade, then you've seen these indicators. ES means exceeding the standard, MS means meeting the standard, AS means approaching the standard, and NM means not meeting. If you have a scholar in 7th or 8th grade, they use a number system. So a 4 means exceeds, a 3 means meets, a 2 means approaching, and a 1 means not meeting. Now, once they enter high school, the scholars do begin a traditional grading system on that traditional grading scale of A through F. And that's just because the high school system is different, you know, than the middle school and elementary system. So we're looking today at the standards-based system, so kindergarten through 8th grade. Exceeding the standard means they've gone above and beyond the application of that standard. They're above grade level. Okay. Meeting the standard means they have achieved that grade level mastery. So they are on grade level if they have met the standard. Now, note that sometimes a scholar in the second quarter, the expectation of what it means to meet the standard in the second quarter, they might be able to meet the standard in second quarter, but in third quarter, when the standard, the expectations for what they can do with that standard might get a little bit harder, and they may not be meeting still in the third quarter. So if you see something like that happening where, well, they met the standard last quarter and now it says they're approaching the standard, that just means that the standard, the expectations for what they need to be able to do with that learning objective or that standard might have gotten harder. So it's not.
So that makes sense to me then. Let me interrupt, because that means that, hey, once that standard lasts all year, right? And some standards might start later in the year.
That's
so
right.
Just like this is just hey, right now they're approaching that standard, but they still have time to get it, or they
That's
met
right.
that level of the standard, but it might, now we still got to keep chugging away at the higher level of the standard. Oh, okay, I got
That's
you.
right. And so if they're not meeting at the beginning of the year, that doesn't mean that they failed. It's not the same thing as they got a bad grade. It means that they are still working toward that standard. Okay. So approaching the standard is where most of our scholars are going to be for most of the year. Okay, because they're making progress every quarter towards the standard. And our goal, of course, is that by the end of the year, scholars are meeting, they've met their grade level objectives, they met the grade level standards by the end of the year. That would be great if they have an MS on their report card by fourth quarter. Not meeting the standard means that they're actually working below their grade level and they're going to need more time and more support. So if they're consistently receiving an NM or a 1, then that means that if we see it in the quarter 1, and if we see it in quarter 2, and we still see it in quarter 3, an NM or a 1, this is where we start to say, okay, there are some other things that we need to support the scholar with. They're still below grade level. We want to see progress. We want to see them moving out of the NMs into the AS, approaching standard, and eventually into meeting the standard. So those are the levels of performance that we look at.
I like somebody, I can't remember if it was Miss Garnado years ago, and you were definitely in the conversation, maybe Miss Bishop, as you were explaining standards-based evaluation or assessment to me, it was like building a house or something. I remember you used that analogy. Is that still appropriate to use that kind of an analogy? Yeah,
there's the house analogy and there's the bike analogy. All right, so the house analogy is like you're building a foundation, and that's when you're really in that NMAS, mostly an AS standard. They're building a foundation. That's okay. They're okay to be building, and then they're building the structure, and they get the frame, and then eventually they get the walls up and the house is built. And the bike analogy is kind of the same way. At the beginning of the year, you're really on training wheels. You're needing a lot of support. Then you graduate from the training wheels, but someone still has to help you, along the way. And then eventually you're flying away on your bike and you're meeting or exceeding the standard. So it's building blocks.
Yeah, and I think it's hard. It's a hard paradigm for us to move because we're so used to saying, hey, my kid is on honor roll, or my kid has straight A's and it's October. It's like, that doesn't really matter, right? I mean, it's just like, what are we learning? How's the standards going? And it's building that house. You can't say within 1 month of starting to build the house, yay, I have a full house built.
Right, exactly. We have to build each skill. So I'll go into just a little bit more depth on the difference here between what we're talking about, standards-based grading, and the more traditional grading, which a lot of us, if you're a parent, and those of us, a lot of us grew up on the traditional grading system. And so it's a different paradigm shift for many of us. So standards-based grading is based on learning goals or objectives. And a traditional grading system is really just based on 1 grade per subject. It's not about objectives or standards. Standards-based uses a number of levels of criteria, meaning that we're looking at specific skills within that standard. And a traditional grading system really is based on just a percentage system. It's not about specific skills within that standard. It's just whether you got it or not. You either got it or you didn't get it. Standards-based assessment measures only the work that was done towards that standard, nothing about behavior or effort.
Turning in late or
Turning it in late, right. While we teach those skills, right?
Yeah.
Of course, we teach skills about behavior and about giving in your best effort and doing your homework. We teach those skills and we do assess those skills through our SEL program, or emotional support and behavior support. But it doesn't have anything to do with the scholar's ability to learn. So we look at those things separately. A standards-based approach includes individual evidence only, so my work towards my standards, and a traditional grading system. If you've ever been in like a group work scenario where someone didn't do their job and now everybody gets a bad grade, none of that in a standards-based
or grading on a curve, would that be like grading on the curve type of thing?
Yeah. That's a traditional grading system. So we focus in standards-based grading on formative and summative assessments for grading. So that means formative means daily checks for understanding. We check to see if our scholars are learning through quizzes, through what we call exit tickets, through teacher observation and anecdotal or just observing things about the scholars. And in a traditional grading system, everything's included, including homework scores, review, practice. And we don't want to look at those items for telling us whether a scholar has mastered something, because they're practicing and they should be able to practice it without it being counted against them. And then again, we already talked about this, that in a standards-based approach, we look at the most recent evidence of learning. And a traditional, every score is collected and averaged. In standards-based, we use common quality assessments. So certain types of assessments count towards looking at mastery. And in a traditional grading system, some of that evidence for whether or not they achieved the standard is more subjective. And then in standards-based approach, it discusses all aspects with students. So our scholars, that's why they have a leadership notebook. That's why they're involved in the conference, because they are a part of the conversation about their own data and about their own growth. And in a traditional grading system, someone else makes the decisions about the grading and just tells the student what that's going to be. So we try to, we're trying to really grow in all of these areas as a standards-based learning school and a standards-based grading school. And we just want you to know what that means.
I like one thing you just said. I want to key on that. I don't know if it's in your next slide, but you said we're looking at growth. So would standards-based be more of a growth mindset and traditional is more of an achievement or end?
That's exactly right. Yes, standards-based is definitely a growth mindset, because that's exactly the point of looking at the most recent evidence of learning, at looking at growth, at looking at progress. So it's growth mindset and it's whole person. Of course, that's what we're all about, whole child education. Yeah,
right.
So I won't go too far into depth with these things, but you may hear certain words thrown out, as a parent, like, well, what's a benchmark assessment? And what do you mean when you say a formative assessment? So we just collected a few of these definitions for you that, our when we talk about the benchmark assessment, those are quarterly assessments we use to check and see how they're mastering towards their standards. A formative assessment is kind of like a quick check. It's a periodic check throughout the class period that we check to see how scholars are learning. Of course, the grade is that end of quarter summary representation of that scholar. When we say mastery, what we mean by mastery is that the scholar is demonstrating an understanding of that standard at a grade level, at their grade level. So they're demonstrating mastery, or they're demonstrating performance of that standard. Let me see, the proficiency scale is the ASMNM MS, ES, those 4, 3, 2, 1, all of those indicators are what we call the proficiency scale. The standards are these statements from the state of Arizona. This is what we build our curriculum off of. It tells us what students are expected to be able to do at that grade level. And then a summative assessment is a tool that we use at the end of a quarter or at the end of a period of instruction to tell us how much progress the scholar has made throughout the quarter. So just a few little words and phrases you might hear as you're talking about your scholars data. And then my last slide just talks about upcoming scholar parent teacher conferences. So what can you expect next week if you are called in for a scholar parent teacher conference? Our conferences are generally scholar led when scholars are ready to do that. They lead their conference through their leadership notebook, looking at their data. We just took our MAP assessment. That's one of those benchmark assessments we were just talking about. And so they should know their data about how they're growing and how they're achieving. And so they'll take a look at that data, and they'll take a look at their classroom data and hopefully be able to walk you through what they're learning and how they're growing. You will, for this round of parent-teacher conferences, your scholars teacher will reach out and let you know if you need to attend a conference. You're always welcome to request a conference. So if you are not necessarily being told that you need to come in for a conference this time, but you'd like to check in and talk about your scholars, data and everything, you are welcome to do that. But this quarter's conferences will be more targeted. We want to look specifically at where scholars can grow. And if you've got if your scholar is still receiving a lot of NMs or not meeting, then we're going to be looking to meet with you and talk about how can we grow this scholar and how can we help them work towards mastering those standards by the end of the year. So questions, Dr. Winsor, are there any other things you'd like me to touch on?
Stop sharing your screen. Let's just go ahead and I'll open it up and see if anybody has a question. Ms. Rodriguez, ask away.
Yeah, I find sort of like a problem with the not traditional way of you guys grading, because I feel like works really well for children who like maybe academically do really well, but I feel like it's sort of like a disservice for kids who do not, because like the teacher could easily just put like meeting standards when maybe they're not. So I grew up, with A, B, C, D, like a lot of people did, I'm sure. And so this is new, but I have two different children that are academically different. And so for my child who doesn't struggle, this type of grading system is fine, because I know he's not struggling and I know he's meeting the standards. But for my child who does struggle, this type of grading system doesn't seem to be like a good match for him, because although it says meeting standards or approaching standards, you don't have a whole lot of detail. And like the teacher may feel like that, but maybe that's not necessarily true. Where if you had an A, B, C, or D, I would know he's not meeting the standards. And like, this is like the level that he's at, if that makes sense.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like, why is he not meeting the standards? What is a specific area? Whereas approaching standards, that could mean a whole lot of different things for somebody who doesn't do well academically.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, well, the whole purpose around those phrases, approaching standards, not meeting standards, or meeting standards, exceeding standards, it really is based on a specific set of skills. So when you get the report card and you see the standard, that's describing what they should have been able to do with that standard, I think that's where the difference is. Like in a traditional grading system, you have the indicator is math A or math B, whatever, but there's no set of skills. Like what was it in math that what were they supposed to be able to do in math when they got the A or the B? So when you look at the report card and you're seeing the actual phrases on the report card should state the actual skill that was being assessed for that standard. And that's different than just saying, well, in math in general, they got an A, but in math, in problem solving, in math, in place value, or they're able to add or subtract to 2 digits, or they can add or subtract to 3 digits. They're approaching on this area, or they're not meeting in that area, but maybe they're not doing as well in addition or subtraction, but they're understanding place value. So standards-based grading is sort of the point of standards-based grading is to give us a more specific look. And it might be useful for you as a parent when you have those conferences with your teacher to ask those specific questions like, okay, so it says he's approaching a standard in this skill. Can we look at, deeper into that skill, and what are some of the areas of concern in that skill, and how they came to that grade? So there's opportunities for questioning there.
It may be what we need to do also is give some more education and information out to the parents about the different levels of those standards. Hey, let me get Miss Brock in here. She's raised her hand as well. Here we go. Ask away, Miss Brock.
Hi, okay. So I have a question about the grading system. I have 2 other kids that went through Paideia, and I never really had an issue. So my youngest, he's in 2nd grade now, and our last report cards that came out, we had conferences. He got basically all approaching standards, and during the conference, all the teacher mentioned was his behavior.
Oh, okay. We need to do better there. That's good feedback.
And like with the breakdown that Ms. Garrison just did with everything, behavior is not supposed to be included. So, and it's been bothering me for a while, and I was going to bring it up at this conference coming up. If the actual approaching standards was based off of his behavior, or was it based off what he's doing? Because like when he's doing homework at home, he does pretty good across everything, especially math. But like what she was saying was he's just not really focused in class, which I understand because he was in kindergarten when the pandemic started. So he had literally a half a year of school. So we're really trying to work on that right now. But I just felt like his grade was mostly based off of his behavior more than anything else. And so I was wondering about that. So I'm glad I did come into this chat today. And like, how do I bring that up to his teacher? How can we figure out like where he actually is academically aside from the behavior?
Great question. Okay, I'm going to put you back in the queue there, and then Victoria, you can address that one. Okay.
Well, that's a good question to bring up in your conference. Definitely ask about the specific, the skills that he's demonstrating mastery in, or the way that he's demonstrating that he's approaching standards on those skills. Behavior, now I'm saying that the behavior piece is not part of the grade, right? So we don't grade behavior, but behavior sometimes does affect how, sometimes your behavior might affect how you are, sometimes behavior can affect you, what you are demonstrating in class. So even though that grade is not based on the person's behavior, so the teacher might be bringing up the behavior, it might be impacting the way he's able to demonstrate mastery in class. So those are questions to definitely ask. Ask about the impact of that behavior on his actual achievement, and where the breakdown is on approaching the standard on that achievement. Those are great questions to ask the teacher.
Yeah. Now, eventually, when we get back to where we're supposed to be, scholar-led conferences, the scholar has, your little guy has his leadership notebook open, and he's going through his leadership stuff. And then the teacher would go through the standards and where he is in each of the standards. But that's great feedback for us to make sure that our teachers are focused in on those standards, and the conversation is guided well. Thank you. All right, I got Miss Melissa. Where'd you go? There you are. Gonzalez. Ask away, Miss Gonzalez.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to suggest or like give feedback because when the last, not the most recent report card, the first one came out, I had asked about parent-teacher conference and they're like, no. And I was like, is there any way that I can meet with somebody? Because my daughter didn't really have a set teacher at the time. And she's like, oh no, we only do it. We only do it if it's absolutely like necessary, kind of. So if you guys can just remind the teachers to be kind of more open about it, because even if she's doing okay, I mean, we don't get to meet them. We don't get to go on campus. We don't see them. So
Yeah.
to interact and be able to ask questions like, so
Yeah.
what's going on? What are you guys covering? Just to be able to make that communication would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are you
Yeah.
referring to the October, the October parent conferences, Melissa?
What was that?
Were you referring to the last ones? They had the October one or the?
The
It
first
was the
conference.
last one that you guys had because I had tried to reach out and it was like, oh, she's doing fine. She doesn't need one. And then she brought a report card home and it had an NM. And I was like, it's a little bit misleading on my end. So like, I thought she was doing fine. And then just to let you know, I did reach out to 2 of the teachers. One replied and one I have no response on.
Okay, we could do better there. All right, Victoria, respond to that
Thank you
one.
for, yeah, thank you for that.
Thanks, Melissa. So how do we educate? Because there's a purpose of the October one, the first one, and everybody should get a parent conference on that very first one in September, Victoria?
First one, the very first one in September is all, all scholars should be met with. And then we do start to scaffold to scholars that we want to address certain things with to help with them grow. But we certainly want to meet with anyone who wants to meet with us.
Yeah, so I think one of the things to make sure that we educate both our scholars. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so we'll look
All
at-
right, Melissa,
we'll
I got the message.
Yeah.
Okay. So
We'll have to
I
look
think we
into
need to
that, yeah.
Educate our teachers too, is to reach out and say, hey, if you want one, please do this sign up genius. It's not required. And especially right now, there needs to be a high focus on scholars who are falling behind, and we really need to focus on, but everybody's welcome to. And maybe that was the miscommunication, and we can guide that one. Thanks, Ms. Gonzalez. All right, here's what we got. We're at the top of the hour. Ms. Garrison, thank you so much. I think we'll have you on again because that was so informative and enlightening for us.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
And then, okay, here's what's coming. So next Friday, I've invited Ms. Mendonça, who is the Director of Assessment, Data and Intervention. So she's going to come on and help us understand the new data we just got, the MAP data, the Measure of Academic Progress data. And she's also going to help us to understand what is the impact and how do we use Exact Path and Reading Eggs for all scholars, not only those who are struggling or falling behind, but those who want to accelerate. It's for all scholars, and Mrs. Mendonça will help us understand that. The following week, I've asked Mr. Chambers to join us and talk to us about this wonderful event coming up in April, on April 1st. And so I'll let him explain that. We can put that on your calendars. All right, thank you, everybody.
Oh, Dr. Winsor, can I just make sure everybody understands that what's coming up is just progress reports. This is not the report card. This is not the final report card. And so that's not coming till March, or sometime in March, yeah.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.